So welcome everybody. Great to be here with you in the circle. Just wanted to give a couple quick announcements before we get underway. So number one, we're having a one-day retreat here at our place in on 6 acres in Southwest Virginia, outside of Abington, Virginia. The Big Below one-day retreat. It's called Renewing the Body, Mind, and Spirit. So we still have a little bit of space left. You'll meet a lot of your friends here in the circle this Saturday if you want to join us. We have a annual New Year's retreat, December 30th to January 1st in Black Mountain, North Carolina, Christ Mount Retreat Center. So really excited about that. And it's really just a great way to reflect on the previous year and set intentions and compass for the upcoming year, which I think is going to be quite an amazing year, 2025. So it's a powerful way to start the year, kind of like in the same way that how you start your day really sets the tempo for the entire rest of the day. Like that first 30 minutes of the day is really essential. I think how you start the year really sets a tempo for the rest of the year. And, many people are starting the year getting smashed and trashed and not knowing where they were and where they are and all that sort of stuff. But we started in a very conscious, intentional way. It's something that I kind of just realized I wanted to do some years back. And now I have other people doing it as well. And yeah, it's really powerful in a beautiful setting in nature. So I'll be sending more information about that, the New Year's retreat that we'll be doing. We'll be incorporating some breath work into that retreat as well. Thanks to everybody who's been supporting us on Patreon. If you'd like to support us, let me put that in the thread here. It's greatly appreciated. And I do personal sessions and work with couples and groups as well. So if that's something that you want more information on, feel free to reach out about that. We've been doing this for I don't know anybody know how many months we've been doing this now? Maybe
Since
like
August 1st,
August.
or
Yeah.
since August since August in the timeless now. So I think it's been really great, and I think it's been a powerful kind of pattern to come in on Thursday nights live, and then it gets shared on YouTube and as a podcast, and other people can listen later on and receive the benefits as well. So there's interesting space for me where there's like so many potential things to talk about, and also feel very, very open. So if you guys want to throw out any themes of things that you are feeling into, things that are on your mind, on your heart, things that you're inquiring into, things that are challenging for you, could be things that are successes for you, but maybe wants to share anything that they feel is like alive for them. We can maybe just throw out a few different things, and we can maybe choose one, or we can maybe sometimes I can find a way to weave them all together. You can also use the chat to to type things in. You can raise your digital hand if you'd like to share. Um, when it's a somewhat smaller group, it's okay just to, yeah, Robin, go ahead.
Um, one topic I'd like to talk about today or sometime is ways to bridge the divide.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
How to be sensitive, when to do it, when to try, when not to try,
Yep.
how to do it, what to say.
Yep. Okay. Anybody else?
and then maybe Brian, if you want to if you want to discuss differentiating the guidance from God that comes through versus the thoughts and voices of the mind,
Yep.
I'll be ready to talk on that.
Chime
And
in.
yep, and
Yeah,
a little
Jacob
later.
was saying in the when did you say that? Was it in the men's mastermind group or somewhere? Or maybe it was right
Yeah,
after.
that was in after the mastermind last night.
And
Yeah.
then he already was getting answers by the morning
Yep.
on it. So yeah, those two I think are really good themes that are alive right now. There's things around masculinity that I think are interesting to talk about for a few different reasons. One is because I just think that's the time that we're in. There's this rise of the new masculine happening. Um, and it's something that I think there's it's something that can be challenging to people that don't understand it or don't get it or fear it or have had trauma with it or have been exposed to different types of masculinity that are not conscious or um, in supportive or in service to all. But also, it's an energy that's like really needed, and the real transformation that we're calling forth won't happen without it. So the that integration of the masculine and feminine, I think, is really key right now. So that's another theme. This one's going to be a little bit edgy, but I like edgy. So fighting, war, there's this kind of idea, obviously that in spiritual circles that these things are bad, right? But my edgy question is, are they really bad? Or is this a part of the way the universe works? And is there a way to uh, be with the battle as it's transpiring and kind of be a still point or be a center of peace amidst the storm? So that's another theme. Anybody got anything else?
I know one that's been alive for me, Brian, and that's just stillness.
Yeah. The interesting thing about stillness is how do you talk about it?
I don't know,
I think that
but
that's been the challenge throughout the spiritual teachings throughout history. Is um, I think there's a lot of confusion because trying to talk about something that
mhm.
can't really be spoken about in words.
I think so. I mean,
Hi,
we could
Antonio.
talk about the. Hi, everybody.
Welcome.
Um, of course, we could talk about the stillness, and discuss it, and then go practice it. And of course, when we're practicing it, then we can't talk about it. But you know, um, I think that stillness. I mean, for me, my life was a whirlwind for a large part, and discovering stillness. It's for me, it's now like a refuge. That's where I go, and just that's um and so I think the stillness is really important, to go inside, to disconnect from everything out here, go inside and just be, go into the stillness, into the silence, prolonged, and try to unhook, from the mental loop and just drop into the heart, and just submerging. I mean, when I discovered that, and I've only discovered that, recently in my life, in this, I'm 55 now, and I was trapped in the head, locked into the outside for a very long time. I didn't discover the stillness, until in the latter part of my life. So I think the stillness is a characteristic of source of the divine source of all creation, which some people call God, and um, and I think it's actually at the core of our being.
Well said. Yeah, I think it's the most essential gateway. So, yeah, I agree. I think that what happens that's problematic is to talk about stillness, we're using thoughts and we're using words, which are thoughts. And so the mind can try to think about what stillness is, right? So it takes a lot of skill to be able to talk about stillness without getting someone into thinking about stillness. Um, but it definitely can be done. Um, so yeah.
I thought of a way to connect stillness with one of the ideas you had, Brian,
Yeah,
about is our conflicts bad?
right.
And I know that I started listening to my inner guide pretty strongly many years ago, and I call it the still small voice.
Hmm.
And in a relationship, I've had a relationship now for 17 years. Paul and I live together. And I think the main thing I hear from that still small voice is, no, don't say that. And it saves me a lot of times when I listen to it,
Hmm.
because I tend to be uh, a proactive like talker,
Hmm.
and not that talking is wrong, because I think a lot of times things do need to be said, but I have to think carefully about what I say. And I do think that conflict is often very productive. But like I like to look at the microcosm and then the macrocosm. And in a microcosm between two people, if it starts coming to blows, I feel like I've kind of lost it. Like like everything's lost. And I sort of feel like it's a shame when it comes to blows in the world too with war. I'm not saying that war isn't necessary sometimes, because I don't really know, but I just think I know with a couple, it's better to not let it get to that stage. And you can do a lot to avoid getting it that far.
What if you feel like somebody close to you is living in a way that's not truthful and they're hurting themselves? But you feel like if you say something to them, it could cause a conflict because it could be upsetting to them.
Oh yeah, I definitely think in a circumstance like that I would definitely speak up to the person.
Hmm.
um, Especially if I'm living with them and it affects my life too, and it's part of my business.
Hmm.
Um, but then in another circumstance with my daughter, who once she was 18, uh, she got into drugs, and I I would tell her how I felt and what I thought she should do, but she didn't want to hear it. And there came a point when I realized I didn't really have a right to tell her what to do. And so and she knew how I felt, and she knew that it wasn't a good path she was on. So I didn't need to say anything. There was nothing left to be said, really.
Because you already said it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But then Paul, when he talked to her once when she was 18, he was very adamant. He said, "Look, man, you are on the edge of the toilet. You are right here on this edge. You go any further and you are in. And it's really hard to get out." And he was
Hmm.
really firm with her. And I'd done the same thing, but he did it, real aggressively at one point. And she respects him now. It's been 18 years, and she just agreed. She just had got an opportunity to go into rehab like yesterday or the day before. And it's the first time she's ever done that on her own. So
Good for
she
her.
admits, she always says, tell Paul I love him, you know?
Hmm. Yeah. I think it ties into Jacob, what Jacob brought up too about truth from falsehood. Um, because I think when you're not living in alignment, if you really want to simplify it down to its base, right? If you're not living in alignment with the truth, you're going to suffer. And if you are living in alignment with the truth, then you're, as Jesus said, the truth will set you free. So you're liberated inside. And so I think that we're in a time, I was just really feeling this strongly today that, especially tuning into certain things in the news and so forth, I think we're in a time where the truth is about to be exposed on a lot of different levels collectively. And a lot of people are not going to like it. And there could be a lot of conflict, but the conflict is what's going to allow the truth to be seen and for us to awaken, basically, on a multitude of levels.
I feel the same way.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I'm feeling is like, because we have this idea, I don't, I think we should make a distinction too between like, what would you call it? Like, the military industrial complex, right? So there's that whole thing, which is like a for-profit industry. But then there's just this kind of natural conflict that can emerge as humanity is evolving and awakening and growing into the truth of who we really are. Um, and and you can break it down into the relationship component like you did, Robin, too. Like, couples, um, their couples will have a conflict, and that conflict will either break them apart or it will deepen their intimacy, but there are certain conflicts that you don't want to avoid them because that's what's going to deepen your self-awareness, your intimacy with each other, your self-understanding. Is this making any sense?
Yeah.
What I'm sharing?
Mhm.
Okay. So then there's like this paradox where can you be at peace with the conflict?
Mm.
You know? So kind of like the the calm, the eye of the storms kind of metaphor, or as you guys were saying, the stillness. Like
Mhm.
you can be with the conflict, understand that it's necessary. Maybe you're even like seen as partaking in it in some way, but you're not doing it from the ego. You're not doing it to try to hurt anybody. You're doing it to stand up for the truth, to stand up for uh, the good, the beautiful, love. Um, to be in devotion to being a channel for God to flow through you into this world and to uh, bring that creation into being.
I have a small question.
A small question. Go ahead, Antonio.
Just I find that for me that um just and it's personally for you, Brian. When because that word means so many different things to so many different people. And my question to you is, what does it mean to you? Which when you say the word God, um, do
God
you
is
mean?
the God. Okay,
But
so
let me finish. Do you mean because I'm a follower of Christ, and
mhm.
I differentiate Christ from the person of Jesus of Nazareth. My experience has, shown me many different things about, what the Christ really is beyond the human personality of the Nazarene. And so, again, um, when you say the word God, the specific question, are you referring to the biblical God? Is my question.
In the Bible, it says God is love. And to me, that's the simplest definition of what God is. So to me, the great realization for me was there was this idea that I had the idea for quite a while that there's one creator, and we're all part of that one creator. But there was kind of a sense of like almost like a which this is kind of pretty prominent in the new age scene a lot of times. It's almost like a nihilistic kind of a feeling of like none of this really matters. It's just this thing that's happening and I can do whatever I want and just try to get my hedonistic pleasure out of it as best I can. Everyone else try to get theirs and let's try to make this what we can make it, you know. And then there was this much deeper realization that came through that this this universe comes from one, the one creator, but it's not just this like empty thing, which was like where I was at a certain point. I really felt in this deepest level of truth that the whole universe is sourced out of love, and we're loved beyond anything that we can even like comprehend with our minds, and it's regardless of anything that we do. So this is where I think like the teaching of Jesus is really powerful. Is this, and we talked about it a little bit here in the past, the technology of forgiveness. So there's this sense that you kind of realize that you are loved regardless of what happens or doesn't happen or what you do or don't do. You're infinitely loved just because you exist. Just in the purest essence of being, we're loved. Now there's like a paradox where like the more you realize that, then the more you do live righteously, you know. But there's this realization that everyone is the expression. Even I was talking to somebody recently, and I was saying how I had this deeper realization of in the Bible it says we are made in the image of God, right? So I feel like I didn't really know what that means until recently, where it's like we're made in the image of God means like we are each the reflection of God, and to me, that when you deepen into that stillness and you deepen into that essence of the realization of who we really are, um, it's like everything is shining. It's a big glow. Everything has this big glow. There's a luminosity to everything, and the divine light is shining in everything. And when you're in that realization, in that consciousness, which is, I think it's the truth of reality, um, you don't need to worry about, because there's so much talk and so many people in Christianity talk, so much emphasis on like demons and devils and evil um, but there's no need to even think about it when you're in this consciousness, when you're in this truth, when you're in this light, there's no need to even consider that stuff because it doesn't have it can't touch you when you're in this light. And I think that light is the truth, you know, and anything else that we experience is like a temporary distortion of the truth. So for me, God transcends any kind of image of anything we can conceptualize or anything we can imagine or anything we can think of, you know, any kind of it's God's not a person. God's not anything that we could in our minds, we could be like, oh, there's God right there. That's not, in fact, anything that you can point to is definitely not God. You know, God is um, ever present and infinite and unchangeable and unshakable.
I agree with I agree with so much of what you said, except right now when you said I think you point to I think that everything that you point to is
No,
God.
I
In fact,
understand. I understand,
got it.
I understand, but it's but people.
There's nothing but everything as that and the omnipresence. And again, the reason I asked about the Bible is just that the Bible has so many different explanations. And, I've been searching personally, I've been searching for the meaning of that word all my life, and
Yeah,
so I think like many of us have. And
yeah,
and I'm totally respectful of whatever definition anybody has for that word for themselves. Absolutely. Whether it's the same as mine or different, I I've actually um you come to realize that everybody's definition of that word is absolutely their own and perfect for them. And but it's a very, I think it's a very complex and loaded word in many ways. And I mean, for example, you said in the Bible it says that God is love, but in the Bible it also said that you know God told Abram to sacrifice his kid to prove his love. So there's a lot of different, the Old Testament, the New
Yeah.
Testament, and all that.
Well,
And I mean, we could go on for,
I think that's just it though. The Old Testament and the New Testament. So Jesus brought the New Testament, right? And that's the Old
yeah,
Testament. So that's how I see it. Is like
right,
Jesus was like, here's the real deal, you know. Um,
right.
but the
Well,
other
that's the
thing,
whole thing. I mean, it's just a very complex word.
yeah, I think
And remember,
a good way of saying it would be that we're all a reflection of God. Would probably be a good way to, almost like a mirror. Like we're all mirroring, we're all reflecting God. We're all reflecting that divine light. Um, yeah, I think that's probably a good way of saying it.
All that is all there is.
Oh, that is all there is. No one can disagree with
That's,
that.
I mean, it's the all, the all. In fact, nothing exists. In fact, in my search, I've come to realize that, what I just said, all that is all there is. There is only all creation is one single unified being
Yes.
in infinite expressions.
Yes.
Playing separate things with amnesia. Uh,
Yep.
because it's very difficult to be the only one forever and have no equal. So
That's why I think that this group is called the circle, where I always imagine the circle being like the largest context of the whole, you know? It's like the circle's like the zero, but also infinity, right? Everything in creation is in the circle, which is, I like that thought. Because yeah, it's a miracle that it exists at all, or nobody knows how, really. I
There are
mean, and yeah, anything.
there are some people who um, study the Bible who say that the Bible says that there will be some people who will descend into hell and never come back. And I wasn't raised with that perception of the Bible. I was raised in Christian Science, and Mary Baker Eddy, who discovered that, said that she's taken the inspired word of the Bible. But there are some people who swear that their every single thing in the Bible is the way it says, and that there's no dividing it. You know, I just What do y'all think about that? Is there going to be a bunch of people who descend into hell and never get out?
To me, we've kind of talked about this before, I think here, and uh, to me, our natural, I don't know if natural is the best word, but our natural home, or let's say our true home, is with God. God is love. Our natural home is with God, the unified field, unbroken beyond any division or separation. And anytime that you fall into the illusion of division or separation, it feels like you're in hell. And I think when you're in that space of feeling like you're in hell, it feels it feels real. It feels as real as anything else, and it feels like it's going to go on forever, you know. But I don't think that that's our true home, and it's a temporary experience that we're having. Like every experience is a temporary experience, and I think that our true home is with God, and the funny part is we never actually left. You know, we've been there. We've been there all along, and it's like awakening to realizing this union. I totally agree with Antonio when he says that everything is this indivisible whole, and God and truth is all there is, right? So it's for us to realize this and to gain confidence in it and live from this place, moment by moment.
yeah, it's the I call it the mystery of the multiplicity of unity. Trying
Mm-hmm.
to. I think we're all on in some way. All of us that are on this awakening path, or you know, are trying to piece together or the same story. Trying to decipher the great mystery. We're all in that same path of trying to figure out what all of this, life, death, God, and all that. And what you were talking about before about the negative entities, and they're there. I mean, all of that exists as well. For example, in the shamanic traditions and in other like pre-Columbian here in Mexico, the Toltecs and such, the infra worlds and the super worlds. I mean, the dimensions. We all know that they're there somehow. Where we're kind of in this third, what we call this third dimension that we wake up to this consciousness. I wholeheartedly believe we live inside a hologram. I do believe this is, in some ways, this is a hologram. And in fact, I heard something that made so much sense that this 3D reality hologram that we wake up to is simultaneously, this is because it's all about paradoxes, things that are opposite that are both true at the same time. And so, um, and it made so much sense. This 3D reality hologram that we live in, that our consciousness is kind of locked into, is simultaneously the highest dimension of hell and the lowest dimension of heaven simultaneously. So it's a transfer station. It's a transfer station where souls come to learn the consequences of free will, depending on your actions. If you cause harm and if you're a jerk and you wish somebody ill and you create negativity, well, you're spiraled down into the lower energies. And if you love and vibrate high and bless and do good, so this is where we come to learn cause and effect, what, and so it's a transfer station, and there are the heavens and there are the infra worlds, and all of those parallel dimensions are all real and it's all there, and they do exist. And I think we're all trying to piece together the great mystery, and for me, that's one of the most exciting things about trying to figure this out. I think we all are, in a way, because we know it's there, right? The invisible worlds, or whatever you want to call it. There's this world outside, this thing outside here that we have our brain to deal with. And then there's the worlds through the inside and the heart. To get to that is the heart. These are the two main, if I may, Brian, when you spoke at the beginning about, the feminine and masculine energy, in my personal healing, this is, there's traditions that speak about like the left side of the body being the feminine and the right side of the body being the masculine. For me, the male energy is up here, the brain, the electric male energy of the brain. And in the heart is the magnetic female energy. And so when there's coherence, when you unite both of them and there's coherence, we get into that higher frequency of unity consciousness, or also called Christ consciousness. And the problem, the reason evil exists, because it does, is the disconnection from heart. When the head energy, and this is why this is where the patriarchy and the misogyny and the vanity and the narcissism, me, I care about me only. I don't care about anybody else. I don't care about the damage I cause. It's all about me. That's when it's that unbalanced male energy stuck in the head, disconnected from the heart, locked into this exterior world, disconnected from the interior world, disconnected from the heart, disconnected from divinity, because it is through our heart that we have access to, and that's where our divinity resides. That's how we connect to the higher realms, is through our heart, through our inner Christ. And so when you are disconnected from the heart, disconnected from divinity, locked in the head, living only from this, that's the false light, So for me, my healing journey has led me to break out of this locked thing in the head and go into the heart and surrender to the heart. And and that's why I think the female energy is so important. And the proper male energy is when it's aligned properly, when the male energy surrenders. When this powerful thing up here surrenders to the nobility in the heart and realizes that's the highest function of our brain and our thinking power and our intellect, is to be a benevolent tool of our heart and our divinity. And so when we do that, when we put this powerful thing up here at the service of the highest part of us, and then we have this alignment. And for me, that's how I've my healing journey has led me to understand and believe that it works kind of that way. So
Thank you for sharing. I
Mhm.
think the problem can go the other way as well, where we also need a brain, and that's lacking in in certain situations for people, and we also need to think about ourselves, and that's lacking in certain situations for people as well. So it's important, I think, to everything you said is I totally agree with everything you said, but I also think there's a higher order integration that gets lost sometimes as well, where people are missing those components, and then they don't know why they're being taken advantage of or why they're being manipulated, and and that's why. So just wanted to add that part in as well, is that that
Yeah.
masculine component is important as well.
This kind of reminds me of your other question that you brought up about, is conflict, necessary?
Hmm.
And I just wanted to introduce, or just like, it's sort of funny, like we talk about oneness a lot here. And I think like in this world, like something that I hope to see healed is that idea that if we are all one and have the same father and mother, then like fighting each other is like fighting ourselves. Like
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
war, I mean,
yeah,
humanity has previously lived in war. It's been
yeah.
like our whole history. So, I mean, it's my hope that, I mean, to me, I think on the highest levels, that's insanity, right? Because God doesn't fight himself like that's, or herself like that's the essence of peace, is that there's no other. It's just safety and love. And so that idea that there's another, that there's somebody who's out there that's going to threaten us, I think that's like the remnants of the separation consciousness that we enacted on this plane, but is like maybe that lower part of the transfer station. So I hope for like almost scientifically for us to kind of like demonstrate that everything is one thing, that like existence is the creation of God, and the other is a hallucination that we lay over it, and is one that's very, very powerful because our minds are extremely powerful. And but it's not the ultimate truth. The ultimate truth is that there's just one, and there's one to love and one to be loved. And so I think like snipping the roots of conflict is something that I'm interested in by just demonstrating that there's nothing in truth to be gained by conquest or these things. They have consequences of like karma. Yeah, and the ego has to be in conflict to exist. Otherwise there's just God. So, I mean, it seems to perpetuate conflict. But I think for those of us on this path, there's an active choice to acknowledge conflict in conversation where it needs to happen for boundaries, but also aim to step out of conflict by creating peaceful ways of living, and by extending love to every mind, including our own, to remember that we're one in God's creation, and that in that love and that light, that there's no need to fight, there's really no reason to. So I'm excited about that in terms of broadcasting new ideas, or old ideas or whatever they may be, to the world. War is hell. If fighting is bad in a family, it's just y'all know. I mean, it
Is
may be.
there a way to, I don't know if fighting is the right word, but let's use it for the moment. Is
Mhm.
there a way to fight while recognizing the divine oneness in the other?
We should get out the Bhagavad Gita, right? Um, or I think that text in particular brings it up, but there probably is. I mean, if it came down to it, it might just be part of the play. I mean, if history repeats itself, then it would be that might happen. But
Or maybe yeah, or like competition. Like
that's
there's a
different though.
yeah.
I mean, all those things are good in terms of rising to the top, but when it goes into like there's a lot of conflict in the mind, but when it starts to be taken out physically, like I agree with Robin, that's when like that just deflation, like that's where kind of all civility and communication collapses into just, well, destroy these bodies and
what
then try
about
again.
consensual fighting?
Yeah. I went to a class once that was so helpful. It was called Fighting Fair.
Hmm.
And we learned ways to deal with our partner that made it more harmonious when you have a conflict. And like she suggested that each person kind of help set guidelines. Like mine were, no swearing, no yelling, no put downs, uh,
Yeah,
things like that.
if you saw the divine uh essence in another person, you naturally wouldn't call them things that aren't what they who they truly are. You would yeah, that makes total sense that those things would not be happening. But
One and one
but
of the
see,
best
the
things.
thing that's interesting is if we really look at the story of Jesus, he fought with people all the time. He's constantly fighting with people, you know? So this is kind of
Mhm.
what I'm getting at is there's something there, and this is what I think the time that we're entering right now is I think Jesus really he really stood for the truth. And when there was like hypocrisy or bureaucracies that were not aligned with that truth, or there was deception, or there was he just spoke to it. I don't think he was trying to hurt anybody, but he was like aligned with the truth. And
It's that's interesting though, Brian, because the truth a lot of times doesn't need to defend itself, you know?
mhm,
So I am like when I think back on him, I think it'd be very easy for people to imagine him in a certain way, but
mhm,
actually that his energy was in a different way. Because I imagine him standing up for the truth, but with just this so much love that
mhm.
it does not feel like you're being, you know, attacked. Because a lot of times people when they stand up, oh, see, Antonio, that was awesome.
Bye,
Um,
Antonio. Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Adios.
but yeah, it's interesting in terms of um, I just feel him saying those things with so much love that it's a real example of how to stand up for the truth, but not being opposing to anybody because
That's
the
what I'm
truth is
getting at.
including
But but
everybody,
but
you know.
Yeah,
but then
but go ahead, Jacob.
he also did go in and flip the tables up in the
Yeah.
church.
Well, not only that, but what I was going to say is I agree with the way you described it, Will. I think that was the inner
Hmm.
state, but
Hmm.
people didn't like it, you know,
Mhm.
to the point where they
Well,
hung him on a cross.
that's true. I think the differentiation is that he is speaking to their souls, which are included, and the soul is never being rejected by the teaching, but the
The
ego or
ego.
who we think we are,
Yeah.
is like, oh, this is, I
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
handle this. So,
The ego's like,
but
oh, you're embarrassing me, and I'm an important rabbi, and you're saying I'm wrong, and I
but
don't like you.
really, the course says that they were infuriated by his guiltlessness. That was the thing that took him to the cross, is that the ego can't stand that another man is blameless, completely guiltless. And when they were faced with that, the murderous intent, which is like in the depth of the ego's perception and separation, what like holds it is the belief we're all, guilty, couldn't handle it. And so it's like we need to crucify this man. Or at least that's how the Course in Miracles explains that particular altercation. But I mean, I certainly think that he demonstrated powerfully, kind of truth, but um I
But
just think that
I think
there's
but I
so
think
much
like
love and inclusion in it that people don't understand it, because truth includes everybody with love, like you were saying already. That's so rare from us. If somebody's in a separated state of mind, they can't comprehend being loved that much. And to me, that's what's so radical, is if you're able to show up and love somebody who is acting violently towards you. Like that's a state of consciousness that I admire. It's very challenging. It's like an incredible advance to be that.
So I wonder, did he really, maybe he just blew it that day when he flipped all the tables. I don't know. I can't say. I mean, it kind of showed, maybe it kind of showed that he was human and he did have emotions and but because otherwise you could use that excuse to do a whole bunch of crappy things in
Mhm.
your family and throw dishes in the sink because you have an important point to make, you know?
And there's a
I've heard
time.
I've heard a take on, or go ahead, Jacob.
I was just going to say there's a time, for everything. There's a time to stand up and show, I guess, the truth in a powerful way. And there's a time for peace, and there's a time for peace, a time
Hey,
for
that's a
love, and
song.
it's also in Ecclesiastes. Is that it? There's a time
Yeah.
for, yeah. There's a time for peace. There's a time for war. There's a time for all this different stuff. And then, I guess differentiating, knowing when that time is for that particular thing. Christ was in a direct connection with God, and they were one, and so he knew when it was time to do what it was time to do.
I did pour orange juice on my husband's head once.
It was time.
My kid said he deserved it.
Holy Spirit told you to?
Yeah, God, you say,
Yeah, I just
God
like,
told
oh
me to
my
do that.
God.
No.
You got to differentiate the voices and thoughts of the mind and the actual guidance from God.
I still don't know if it was from God or but it sure was fun.
I think, Will, you were talking about how did you say it? I don't remember exactly how you said it, but it related to something I was thinking about this thing of like being in the sort of truth. Like, can you love somebody so much that you will tell them the truth, knowing that they're probably going to be really upset with you and maybe even try to hurt you or kill you? That's a kind of love that we don't, because again, like we think about love in this way that is a part of love, but there's other types of love, and there's like I think there's these deeper kinds of love that most of us don't even access, you know? And so there's like a kind of love where it's like, because I think usually we think of like, I want to tell somebody something that's going to make them like me more, really, right? I mean, that's kind of like what we think of as love. But
Hmm.
then there's this other level where it's like, I'm going to tell somebody something that might make them dislike me, or
Like
might
who
make
you
them
voted for.
hate me, or might make them or might make them violently assault me, you know?
I
But
well, I would
but
hope
but
not.
but but I love them so much that I'm willing to take that.
Which is what Christ did.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
To me, what comes to mind with that is that, how we talk about like when we go into the stillness, there's an inner guide,
Yeah.
and I really think that the Holy Spirit is kind of like one, just like God is one, that it's like a onboard intelligence that each of us have, and that if you're in
Hmm.
tune with that, that one does know, the best way to reach that soul. And I don't know, I think it makes me feel safer about approaching situations like that where it's a little more edgy. It's just learning to tune into that guidance that, if you drop into that place when you're meeting these conflicts, and you can trust that hopefully you're being guided by the deepest thing between both of y'all, and not bringing in our own, qualities of ego, which can happen until we're, quite masterful. Yeah, just relating to him and asking him, because it's his mission to bring peace, right? I don't know how to bring peace to another soul, or I don't know what they need necessarily. So, like in those situations where we may be called to speak truth, I think it's helpful to, just be living and relating to that one that does know the best way to bring us all together. Because what I found in the ego is that the ego doesn't believe that God is with each other, having denied it in ourselves, right? We could look at another and be like, there's no way God's with you. And that's not true. That's untrue. Everybody, every sentient consciousness, every consciousness is living in God, right? And to me, that's like the path of respect to each other, and also the path of peace is seeing that and acknowledging that and wanting the Holy Spirit to be lifted up in them for their own good, and not wanting to punish them, because the ego wants to punish each other for the separation that never happened. But I've just experienced that energy so much in the teaching learning environment. It's subtle ways that we, try to prove each other wrong or whatever, and we know that happens in religion. But and then that leads to conflict, because that's still the reminder that something has gone wrong and separation has really happened when it hasn't. And so to me, the Holy Spirit is always reminding of peace. He's bringing the peace that both of us together have not separated. God has not abandoned us. And so that can help resolve those deeper levels of conflict, because the deepest viciousness is just, from those places of feeling, trapped within that egoic construct, and it need not be. And we can remind each other of that very powerfully by carrying it for each other. I think that that's the way, really.
One of the best things I've heard about conflict with a partner is making sure that each other feels like they've been heard. Because so much of the time you're trying so hard to get your point across, and they're trying to get their point across. And that's what causes so much frustration. And I don't do it enough, but that practice of like, what do they call it? Reflective listening or parroting. You could say, so what I hear you say is, and then you respond with what you've heard, but slightly different words. And then that person can say, yeah, that's what I meant. Or they might say, oh no, not that. And it makes things much more helpful to do that.
Yeah, it's really respectful. Whereas the narcissistic tendencies of selfhood don't extend that respect. So any amount of equality or equal respect, I think, is like that level playing field that the soul knows is true, and that everybody wants to be seen in that light.
Yeah, it's kind of like playing a game of catch. I mean, you could just like really throw the ball hard and make it hard for the person to catch, or you can kind of toss it to them in an easy way and allow them to receive it, and then
Mm-hmm.
they can do the same.
Right. That's an art of conflict. And like I've found that most times when I'm being in conflict, it's because I'm dealing with challenging emotions I'm experiencing, and therefore unable to offer somebody, feedback in a manner that is respectful and from like a higher light. And so that reminds me of just, each of us doing our own inner work of going into the stillness and just receiving as much peace and spaciousness as we can. So when those deeper layers of conflict arise, you have the tools to take a moment and not just immediately throw it back on each other, because it's tough when that happens. It's like that reactivity. And I hope that, yeah, just grateful to grow up and move out of that as much as possible.
Yeah.
Jackie,
Hey,
share with us.
hmm, I just I'm thinking along the same lines as Will. I just don't have the right words. But sometimes when you look at the other person and they're trying to make their point, they're trying to hammer it in their viewpoint or whatever, if you look at them and realize that that's just their ego, it's fighting for turf or space or whatever it is that their ego wants. And it's not really the person, it's this little mini demon that we all have. That's the ego that says, you stepped on my rights, whatever. It kind of just disempowers them. Like you don't see the argument just goes away because you realize it's not real. it's something that's imaginary and it's in their head, and you can just disengage. You don't have to engage in it. I mean, I just think it's a great place of peace to realize that you don't have to take the bait every time somebody throws it out there. Just, and I don't know. I guess some of you, if you, it could be considered disrespectful to not engage in it, but I just feel really committed to a lot of this banter that people do is just not real. So you're just not obligated to take the bait, you know? So anyway, that's my thought.
Mhm.
Thanks, Jackie.
I can relate to that, Jackie, a lot because I finally figured out in my previous marriage that a lot of times my husband was just trying, he was trying to engage with me. You know, uh, for whatever reason, I don't know if he felt neglected or I don't see how he could have, but all the stuff I did. But, you know, he enjoyed like prodding me and poking at me to get a reaction. And finally, I just finally, after 31 years, realized that I could say, ouch, that really hurt. And I don't like that. And if you do that again, I'm going to have to leave. And that's not the reaction he wanted. He wanted to engage. He didn't want me to go away. And it really helped a lot. Not enough, but it helps.
Mm.
It kind of is like what Will said about people persecuting Christ because he was flawless. People get mad when you won't engage. Like they want to keep it going. And I just think part of getting personal peace is just to find ways to just let it go and not engage, just not. Um, and even, my viewpoint on wars, like I mean, they're just entire countries where people won't let it go. I mean, they're committed to the conflict. They're never committed to finding peace. And I don't know. I just think I think the path is to be committed to finding peace. And eventually there'll be enough people holding that frequency that it will come to fruition. Maybe two more.
Oop, I think you muted yourself there.
Yeah, that's a tough thing when it comes to countries, though, because with two people, you know, you can decide that I'm out of here, I'm leaving. And, you know, when you've got a country next to another country, it's like you don't have that option.
True.
What's interesting is that there's individual trauma, and then there's like collective trauma. There's like trauma that, women carry from, generations and generations, men carry, different ethnic groups carry. Um, so it's like when you talk about like, the war between countries, it's kind of like wars between cultures, and the trauma of the culture is carried from generation to generation to generation. And it takes a strong person to um, be like, the buck stops here.
Hmm.
This has been carried for however many thousands of years, and I'm the one that's gonna put the circuit breaker on this thing, and I'm the one that's gonna be the change, so to speak.
Yeah, in the 12 steps, they have a really crucial uh principle, and that is to let go of the past. And I can't tell you how huge that is. I mean, just um telling yourself to not bring up the past. Like, you know, maybe you can let someone know you're annoyed, like right in the now. But when you go back to like, yeah, and remember when you did that and that and that, it's just not helpful. And if people could let go of the past, like or forgive, you know,
Forgiveness is letting go of the past, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
But what I'm saying is big. So it's like it's not just I'm going to let go of what happened last week. I'm going to let go of what happened in my life. It's like I'm going to let go of what happened in every single person's life that's ever lived. That's the kind of level that like we're talking about.
That's the level that we need because humanity lives in the past, and so our collective realization will be in the moment. It'll be of our innocent spirit, like in the moment, unchangeless and loving and good. So yeah, that might be, I mean, that's crucial. That's a great teaching for all of us. And it's kind of like consciousness work because until our consciousness, I guess, rises up and demands that we will forgive and like let go of the past, and there's like, we're born into this karma. And I think a lot of people and groups of people fighting, are in states of mind that are just, it's really easy to, you know, think that the other person, is the problem and fight and all this stuff. And that's why I think, yeah, like doing things like this is like raising little by little the consciousness on earth that we can have better thoughts and not being in these lower minded thoughts of if I kill you, then somehow I'll be safer. Or I'll that revenge is anything that really offers me anything besides like a temporary feeling of superiority. Like all those things need to be recognized as like false and small, very small, weak goals compared to like peace, which global peace would be a beautiful thing. It would radiate like a shining light, it would provide so much joy. It would give us the opportunity to travel all around the world together, advance like solutions all over the world. So I mean, it's a beautiful goal, for humanity to start to really teach each other. um yeah, it is a state of consciousness. It's a realization, that there is only one thing here, and evil and anger and destruction are not justified. They're not needed. That old way of taking out the fight need not be. I believe. I mean, it definitely served a lot of experiences. I suppose we learned through them, but at this day and age, it seems like we're at this potential shift, where it's like, how do we really want to live? I know I would rather live in peace and harmony in nice little villages and by with a nice little river and, hanging out under the sun, listening to good tunes, talking to good people. But so it's like kind of offering, demonstrating these ways of thinking, and because we all have to rise up and make a choice to choose actively to let go of that previous, way of perceiving. And it's a lot of work. That's why we need friends. So thank y'all.
You're welcome. Friends and community.
And it makes it even tougher when the fight is maybe over some property, and one person thinks it's their property, the other person thinks it's their property. You could talk about forgiving the past, and maybe they could do that, but what about the property?
I think that there's like the relative world, right? And I'm never one to discount the relative world. I think the relative world is important, but there is this deeper layer that's, the absolute truth that's deeper than the relative world. So it's like, do you want to, I'm trying to think how to say this. Like, to me, heaven exists outside of time. So there's this idea that you go linearly, and then at the end of the line there's heaven. But I think it's more like heaven is, well, let's put it above actually. Heaven is here, and then the linear line is like that. And like heaven is outside the realm of time. And so this is why I think what we're getting at is so powerful, because to forgive everything that's ever happened, you can only do that if you recognize the essence of who you are that lives outside of time. Because the it's like the timeline is like this happened, this is the realm of cause and effect. But then there's this level that is not in the realm of time. It's non-linear. and it's like it's untouched by this world.
Can you give an example?
I don't know. Let's see. Um,
Dreaming at night, maybe?
I think that the reason that Jesus was so fearless around death and um, his own death or his potential death was because he was already one with God, which was and is one with God, which, to me, one with God, if you're one with God, that's heaven. It's like the space of the universal, unified field of intelligence. You're in this unified field of intelligence. So he was there in the now. And I think that we all have access to that truth. That's the truth of who we all are, but we have forgotten. We're so immersed in this linear world of like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and I want to get back at this person and this person, I'm mad that they did this to me, and all of this stuff just keeps the dream going, you know, and we're lost in the dream. But as we wake up to who we really are, um, we recognize this dimension of consciousness that exists outside of time, that's untouched by anything that ever happens in time, and we're able to forgive because we're not dependent upon this world. Will's
Brian, if
Yes,
if I
sir.
could offer this,
Yeah.
the Apostle Paul encouraged the people in Colossus to set their affections on things above and not things that are on the earth.
Hmm.
And after he gave that admonition, then he went on and he said to put to death in you selfishness, strife, passions, and all those kinds of things. So, really, that reflects what you're saying. That
Hmm.
if our attention, if our deepest affections are on things eternal, on things heavenly, that will cause us to put to death all this conflict and fighting over land and not wanting to forgive and those kinds of things. So I can amen what you were
Yeah.
saying
Yeah.
about heaven being
And
a.
also, I think that those things can still be happening, but they're not happening for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's an important thing to point out too, because it's almost like there's all these different dimensions of reality. And um, like, you ever been in a situation where like somebody, let's say you're in this kind of social situation, and you know, one person's like, oh, that guy gave us a look and I'm really upset with him. And you're like, well, I didn't experience that at all. You know, there could be like these two completely different experiences in the same situation, you know? And so I think like the consciousness that we're in is how we're experiencing the world. So the more that we're, um, awakening in our consciousness, the more that we're experiencing the sense of heaven on earth, where someone else might be having a very, very different experience.
Yeah. And Christ taught in the Lord's Prayer, we pray, forgive my trespasses as I forgive those who trespass against me.
Hmm.
And, if we really would just practice that, just think what kind of peace would be possible just
Yeah.
to remember that our our desire to be forgiven is directly proportional to our willingness to forgive.
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about this some here before, and I was saying that I think that Jesus's teaching of forgiveness is um, unique. Like, not that other people haven't mentioned forgiveness, of course they have, but I'm saying his emphasis on it is there's nothing else quite like it that I've come across. Like that, to me, it feels like that's almost like the pathway.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's other pathways too, but if you could just, like you just said, if you could just practice forgiveness and just forgiveness, 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 it like breaks you free of the world of time and space, because you're not holding on to anything.
Well, and then back to the discussion about confronting people, your confrontation isn't so much to get revenge,
Right.
it's uh, to help the other person
Correct.
in a loving way, so
Yeah.
that there's no more need to forgive them because they've stopped being offensive. You know, that kind of thing. And um, yeah,
And then there are times when uh maybe you do have to stand up for yourself, like maybe you were in a difficult marriage and now you're splitting up, and maybe it seems like the only peaceful way to get away is to just give everything, give all your share to somebody else. And maybe there's times when you should do that, but then there might be times where you're like, no, no, wouldn't be right. There's this principle.
I think I mean, there's definitely times to stand up for yourself, but it's different than revenge.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you're not doing it to try to hurt somebody or get back at them. Because I think the thing that's interesting is when we think about um, love, being of service, there's all these different bodies to care for, but there's also this body to care for as well, and that needs care. So yeah, sometimes, like Jacob was saying, you got to listen to God's guidance, and sometimes God's going to tell you to, you know, take care of your body, and so you do that, but you don't do it trying to hurt people or trying to guy like Mark was saying, trying to get revenge on people. It's something that happens in the moment, and then you know, it's released. Yeah, good stuff. I like the getting more into the nuances of this, and the way you guys are breaking it down more and more and getting further into it. Is anybody who has not shared yet want to share? You are invited if you'd like to with words. If you don't want to, that's okay too, but just wanted to give the opportunity. And also, people who have shared can also share too.
I'm having this delightful thought about forgiveness that is one of my favorite thoughts about it. Is that ultimately forgiveness is forgiving myself for replacing or choosing against like God's reality for me. So the idea being that God, when He created us, created His child, created spirit, He created something loving and perfect and eternal. And somehow in this experience of identifying with a separated body mind, I've created the experience that I am this. And so for me, that forgiveness process is forgiving myself for being so deeply entrenched in this idea that this is me. Um, and also extending that forgiveness to everybody. So in that way, I remember eternity. I remember something that is not threatened, and eternally safe in love. But I just love that thought. I don't know if that resonates with any of y'all, but forgiveness is ultimately forgiving myself for replacing God's identity that He gave to me
Mm.
and letting God's identity be restored.
One of the things that I can share is that whenever I've talked with clients about forgiveness, quite often, like the overwhelming majority of the time, they say the person that they need to forgive the most is themselves.
I think that that's the case at the bottom of it. Yeah. And I think that's also where the kind of like devil, evil, the whole thing sort of lives deep within us. Um, it's an interesting thing.
What really helps me, kind of my framework for understanding this world is like this world is a school,
Mm-hmm.
and we're here to learn. We're here to learn how to,
Bro,
grow and awaken in the truth of who we really are,
totally.
right? So I I and this is where I think like religion gets it wrong sometimes. Like I think that in a way it's good to make mistakes because the mistakes are how you grow and awaken and come deeper in the truth of who you are and come into your communion with God. So I don't think we should come in like being so afraid to make a mistake and everyone it's like I
Mhm.
think it's good to try things and then but if you realize it's the wrong way, don't keep doing it, right? Then you learn the lesson and it's like if you're in second grade, you know, you learn the lesson and you go to third grade and then there's a harder lesson. Then you go to fourth grade and there's a harder lesson. And I think it just keeps going like that, you know. So sometimes we feel like we're sometimes we feel like, oh, it's why is it getting harder? It's because you're getting better. So the God's giving you harder lessons you're at the graduate level now, it's like there's the challenges are there for you to that are different than someone who's not at that level. Um, but I don't think it's like something that we have to beat ourselves up about. And I think it's just something that, it's like, oh, okay, the direct translation of sin is to miss the mark, right?
Mhm.
So I think of it as like a dartboard and you like throw it and you miss the bullseye. Well, just try again. It's okay. Just try again. Keep trying until you
That's
hit it.
I mean, that's the Holy Spirit's interpretation. Unfortunately, the ego will interpret that as, failure and punishment. And so it's a good thing to remember that it's always, it's either that idea or God's idea, which is, no, my child, you're redeemed. I got you. We're gonna try again.
Mhm.
But it can be helpful just
And
to,
that's where like as Mark was pointing out too, the forgiveness is really the self-forgiveness
hmm
really key. But I think if
hmm
you see it from that perspective, like you're in a school and you're learning lessons, and the
hmm
forgiveness comes more naturally.
I think that's a great sort of way to interpret this because life is challenging, and so it is a test, and it's temporary, and yeah, so it's a
Yeah,
good way
like
to
for me,
learn.
I did so many things as a teenager I would never do now, but I had to like learn, you know. I
That
Will,
reminds
I
me of
know, I know, I know Will did too.
my grandma. I think has a quote. She's a Christian pastor, but she says like all good Christians have been to jail or something. But yeah, and there's a number of Zen stories about crazy men that all of a sudden they realize that actually their ego was the insane one and dropped into samadhi. And, so it is a sort of interesting the way that path works. But, and yes, I know that my ego has the hardest time admitting I'm full of mistakes. I'm the one that, chose wrongly and all this stuff. So there is an advantage in being able to share that vulnerability. Um, but then also the suffering is relieved by aligning with God's will.
Amen. Amen. Not my will, thy will. I think that might be it. Anybody else have anything else they want to share? Well, I appreciate you all so much for being here and that we carry this, that we integrate and carry this wisdom forward with us the rest of the week moving forward. If you have further questions or things you're exploring, feel free to share them and we can um, we can explore them next week. Have a great week. God bless you and see you soon. See you in the next now.
Peace, everybody.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I love your paintings, Robin.
Oh, thank you.
They're great.
Thank you.